I spent significant time last time reviewing my disappointment with the outcome of my parenting with my second adopted child, Naomi Kovacs. And I've thought a lot more about it too, since I didn't get finished last time, and here I am back again. What I'm going to do is go systematically through each of my four children and identify things about my parenting that I wish were different or outcomes that I wish had not happened in the way they had. Maybe my travails will have some meaning for anybody listening to this, and maybe there are pitfalls that I fell into that other people won't have to repeat if I'm just very candid about them. Uh, as the day went on, and I was thinking about talking about this afternoon, many images of really wonderful moments together happened. As I said, she finally went away to UC Santa Barbara, and once she was liberated, our relationship could become more real because she didn't have the same terrible loyalty conflict she had with her mother, being very bleak and unpleasant and condemning of her having any relationship with me whatsoever. That disappeared after she turned 18 and was away at college. She'd frequently come into Los Angeles because she had friends here. She'd gone to high school with them, and she was frequently staying over with my wife and I in our home when she would come to Los Angeles. We had a what felt like a very normal and reasonable relationship that one would with any child that is away in college and comes to visit. And there were special things that happened too. One of them, of course, was early in college. Her oldest stepsister, Amy, I'll be talking about next, the older of the two stepchildren I inherited, got married, and Naomi was in the wedding party, and that was really fun and felt really nice. We were all a family together. In addition, uh, various kinds of ceremonial events were honored. Thanksgiving, we always had Thanksgiving. For 50 years, we've had Thanksgiving in this house. And when Naomi was younger, starting even when she was just about ready to graduate high school, she started demanding that there be two Thanksgivings. That we usually had the earlier one of the day, and then she would have Thanksgiving with her mother. So we were used to having her at the Thanksgiving table, and she fitted in very nicely. And there seemed to be no strain, and I was enjoying my relationship with her. And we would tell stories and joke, and then she knew the name of her biological mother that was given to her as part of what I passed on to her by way of the file we had on her adoption. And I remember now the name of her biological father was there too. And we knew that he had been a Navy pilot during the Vietnam War. And she had an idea and asked me if I would help her with it. Well, what was the idea? She knew I went to Washington frequently, and she knew that the Vietnam Memorial was there in Washington, and the names of all the U.S. casualties of war were engraved on that beautiful, terrible site on the mall where the memorial was. And she wondered if her father was still alive. She at least had that curiosity. Would I mind, could I take her to Washington sometimes when I went and we could go? She didn't have the courage to go by herself, but if I kept her company, she would go to the wall and we would try and look up his name and see if it was there in alphabetical order. And I said, oh, yes, I would love doing that. That would be very meaningful to me. So I took her to Washington. We had a very nice weekend in Washington. She went sightseeing on her own while I was tied up in meetings. In the evening, we'd go out to dinner. And of course, on Sunday, before we took the airplane home late in the afternoon, we had a free day. And we hiked over from the hotel to the wall and we looked and looked. And no, he was not there. That suggested to her he was probably still alive somewhere, and I had worked out another treat for her. I asked her if she would like to make a visit to Pittsburgh with me on the way home. We would stop over and I would show her where I was born and the house I grew up in and what I loved about the city. And I'd take her to the amusement park that was there and I'd take her to my father's grave and she could see the grave of many of her relatives on my side of the family. So we did that too. We spent an extra couple days in Pittsburgh before we returned home. And it was really lovely. It was pleasant. It was engaging. We had what felt like a very special time together. I felt very much like her father, and she felt like my daughter that I was watching over and providing for. If you had told me that a day was coming when she wouldn't want to be in my presence anymore, I would have been startled. That wouldn't have seemed possible. We also did something for her birthday every year. We would get her a present. We would arrange a time convenient for her schedule for either for us to go to Santa Barbara and visit her up there or for her to come down and we would have some kind of event to go out to dinner with her, some of her friends or some of the other her stepsisters, and we would all go out to dinner together and honor her birthday. So we kept that ritual going. Uh, After a while, the older stepdaughter, who she had attended the wedding of, herself now had a child. So there were now children's birthday parties, and she would come and participate. And she felt very much like a member of the family. It felt fine to me. Uh, all right. I don't know if this is craziness or not. One of the things that happened, though, as the lives of her stepsisters moved on towards marriage, towards becoming parents, with us becoming, my wife and I becoming grandparents and getting involved in that, it was as if they were becoming special in some way and she wasn't, and that I actually cared more about them. If you had to ask me, I would say she was envious. Uh, she didn't like the life changes that we're making for shifting relationships in the family. Uh, didn't feel serious in the beginning, but it came to feel more serious later. So, as I told you, after she graduated, she worked at the Devereaux Foundation for a while. Then the uh, University Abroad program at UC Santa Barbara. And finally, she decided to go into Peace Corps. And just before she left, she ran into the social worker who had been responsible for her adoption and was handed a copy of the file, her real file, the file that had not been released to the public, that had much more information about bears than the simple information we were able to pass on to her. And she was now struggling very vividly with was she going to make any attempt to get in touch with her birth mother or not. But she took a hiatus. She said she was going to brood about that while she was off in the Peace Corps. And when she came back, she would make a final decision about whether she wanted to proceed with that or not. So it was hard staying in touch with her. There was no telephone, there was no internet, there was no electricity where she was, and she was gone for 2 years. I could write to her, but it took weeks for mail to be delivered to her. So I tried to stay in touch with her as best as possible while she was overseas. And the one thing that happened was her second sister was now getting married, and there was going to be a very lavish event. uh, Her second sister, as you'll hear, is a very special person. And there were going to be members of Congress there. There were going to be people from the entertainment industry there. My wife and I found ourselves inheriting the responsibility to have a a really special event with people who are significant in the culture attending. And I thought it can't be an event without Naomi. So I wrote her plenty of time in advance. And I said, we'd like you to interrupt your stay in Cameroon for a period of time. I'm prepared to fly you home. Can you get leave for a week? I'll fly you home first class. I have plenty of miles on American Airlines. it looks like you're going to have a stopover in Paris. So I'll put you up overnight in a wonderful hotel in Paris, and you'll come on to Los Angeles, and then we'll have to get you fitted with your bridal gown because we want you to be part, and your sister wants you to be part of the wedding party, and you'll probably be in culture shock. You're coming out of the jungle and out of a simple village without any electricity, running water, or anything, and people who live a very primitive kind of existence into the fashionable, the elite of the United States. We're going to Joffrey's restaurant overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Malibu, and you'll be in fine surroundings with a very special catered meal. And it's okay if you're in culture shock again temporarily. And then you're going to turn around and go right back the other way too, and have to take the truck 8 hours back to the village in Cameroon when you get back again. Are you willing to put up with all that deprivation and craziness and come? And she said, oh, she wouldn't miss it for the world. So she was at that wedding. And I spent a lot of time talking to her about what she was seeing and learning in Cameroon while she was there. I was very proud of her. And then back she came finally. And one of the things she and I discussed frequently that I've been saying to her starting in college was, from my perspective, she was having trouble with identity formation because of the fact that she was adopted. She seemed to shun having any close, intimate relationships. She seemed more comfortable in groups rather than alone one-on-one with anybody. She seemed not to be dating anybody. I thought for the longest time she may be gay and was just concealing it. But no, she was aloof. She was schizoid, just like I had been when I had been young. And she was having trouble, of course, deciding what to do with her life. And even going to the Cameroon had been a time for her to take a moratorium. So one part of what was happening seems to have been resolved. She knew what she wanted to do when she came back from Cameroon. She had a plan for her life. Uh, she checked it out in the fullness when she got back, and it seemed like the right plan. USC had a doctor, no, it was a master's program in nonprofit administration. She had liked being connected with an enterprise that was a nonprofit, the Peace Corps, that was devoted to trying to do goodness in the world. She wanted to spend the rest of her life doing that. Her favorite job would have been to go work for UNESCO in Paris. That's what she would have liked to have done when she was finished with the Peace Corps, because she was now very fluent in French. She would have loved being in Paris, and she would have loved working for the United Nations, doing something for world peace and for goodness and for the improvement of the world's population. I was proud of her idealism, but she wasn't able to make anything like that happen. She would have been happy with a permanent career in the Peace Corps, I think. She would have been willing to move to Washington and continue to do some kind of Peace Corps work. That didn't work out either. So she was going to get a master's degree, and she knew that the program had a good reputation. She would learn good skills about managing nonprofits, fundraising, laws that govern, and tax laws that govern nonprofits. And SC had a reputation in that program and many of its programs of being able to network people. So they would probably also place her in a job or help place her in a job when she graduated. And she was excited about that. I was excited because she was going to come back and have to live in Los Angeles again because she was going to be going to SC. I didn't like it that she was going to move back in her mother's house. That didn't feel good to me. She said she couldn't do that to her mother. It would be a slap in her mother's face if she decided to live in the spare bedroom that we had always kept as her room when she was visiting us, but she would be back with her mother again. That felt like a retrograde thing that was happening in her life, but all right, for 2 years she was going to do that. But as I said to her, you don't seem interested in forming a close relationship with anybody. You now have a new network of friends. You have a whole bunch of Peace Corps volunteers that you met that live in Southern California, and you're starting to spend time with them. There's even an informal organization that meets every week, and you go off and you party with them. That's fine. I'm glad you have people to be with. but are you sure you want to spend the rest of your life without a close relationship with anybody? I don't know if you do or don't, and it's not up to me to say. There's no correct way to live, but I think it would be helpful if you made the choice to meet your birth mother. That's the strand of your identity that's gotten fucked up, and I would like you to work on restoring it and then see where that leaves you. So after she had been home for a while and started school, she decided she was going to proceed. She would try and talk to her birth mother, and she had been doing research. She had the phone number from the file of where her birth mother had been residing when she gave up the baby for adoption. It was in a small house in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles. She had called the phone number at that house, and what sounded like an elderly man answered the phone. And she had come up with a ruse to try and account for the phone call. She said, because she knew this was the case, that she was calling from the UC Irvine Alumni Association. The number that they had for a student who had attended there in the year, she knew the year, was this phone number. Did the person answering the phone know of the existence of such a person? And the man said, yes, that's my daughter. So Naomi knew she was talking to her maternal grandfather. And she said, well, I'd like to upgrade the files. I'd like to interview the student who obviously is not in school anymore. How do I get in touch with her? And he said, oh, let me give you her address and phone number. She's in the San Fernando Valley. And he passed on the address and phone number where her biological mother was living. And now she took the second step. She screwed her courage up, and she purposely did it during the day, hoping that her mother would be at work and she wouldn't have to talk to her mother, but she would hear her mother's voice. And sure enough, she heard the outgoing message, and it says, hello, this is so and so, her birth mother's name. I'm not here, and neither are, and two female names, but leave a message for us and tell us who you're calling, and the right one will call you back when we're able. And then she thought, I bet you those are sisters. I bet you that my mother's life moved on, and she was still using her maiden name on the thing. What happened? She began to speculate. I bet you, did the pilot come back? No, the pilot didn't come back. That wasn't his name. This is her maiden name. Good detective, my daughter. I bet you she got married again, and that marriage, she got married for the first time, and the marriage didn't work out. And so she was left from that marriage with two children she's been raising as a single mom. And, but she didn't leave a message, and she didn't call back. Now she's decided she would proceed to make the match and to meet with her. And as she had been led to believe, the mother had left a message several years earlier saying she would be happy to be reunited with her daughter. And she left the message too. Now she left a notarized letter that she was up for the match. And she asked Vista Del Mar, she asked Vista Del Mar to help her to make the formal connection with her mother. This was just before Christmas in the fall that she returned home. And the worker she talked to said, well, we have a social worker who's in charge of the reunification program. I'll pass this on to her. I'll pass on your letter. She'll now know that both mother and daughter want to be connected to each other, but she's about to go away for Christmas vacation. And I don't know if she'll have time to get to this file until after she returns. Please be patient with us. Probably after the first of the year, you'll hear about how to proceed with the matchmaking. So Naomi went home. And before she went to sleep that night, she got a call from the social worker. The social worker says, "Is this Naomi?" "Yes." She said, "Well, this is so and so at Vista Del Mar. I'm trying to tidy up everything before I go on vacations tomorrow. And I know these are very special things that I'm in charge of arranging. And I decided I would take care of my file now. And I saw your letter and I saw your mother's letter. And would you like me before I leave? I'll call this evening. Would you like me to arrange a time for a phone visit between the two of you? Would you like to meet in person with her here? How would you like the first contact to happen?" And Naomi said she thought it would be best if it be a phone call. And she said, "If I can arrange a time, I'll call your mother right now. If I can reach her and arrange a time, are you fairly flexible?" She said, "Yes, I'm in school right now. I'm in graduate school. I started graduate school, but I'm on vacation. So I could do it any time that's convenient for my mother." And all right. And sure enough, 10 o'clock that night, she gets another call from the social worker. "You have an appointment at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening with your mother, and she will talk to you then." And Naomi was full of excitement and tension. She called me and she said, "What am I going to talk to her about?" I said, "I don't know. You'll find the words. It will flow somehow between the two of you. It might be awkward in the beginning, but something will come of it. Remember, she wants this to happen too. She wants to get to know you. She's asking for it. Not just you who want that to happen. You said there were three things that could happen if you tried to connect with her. Well, two of them are not going to happen. She's not going to reject you, and maybe the second one is going to come to pass. Maybe you're not going to like her very much or respect her very much, but from everything we know, that doesn't sound likely. So the third thing is going to happen. You're going to have an extra person in your life now. You're probably going to have an ongoing relationship with her, so start it up. That's all. And give me a call in the evening when the call's over. So she called me at 9 o'clock in the evening that evening, and she had been laughing and crying, she said. And she had been on the phone for more than 2 hours. And it had been very moving. She found so many things that she shared in common with her birth mother. They both had a slightly crooked little toe on one foot. Her mother was also fluent in French. Her mother also loved traveling. They discovered they liked certain foods in common. Uh, in addition, Naomi's suspicion had been right. She was a divorced woman. She had two teenage daughters at that point. And the reason that she had gotten in touch with Naomi was somebody in the family had leaked that there was another child that her mother had given up for adoption. She had never told her own daughters, and they were furious with her that there was yet another sibling that they had that they knew nothing about. And they nagged her for several years, saying, "We want to meet our sister. And please give permission so we can proceed to meet our sister." And grudgingly and in fear of trepidation, she had surrendered and agreed to put in the letter so that they could all meet each other. But the conversation had been very moving. They were eager to get to know each other. One of the questions that was asked her was, "How are your adoptive parents going to feel about the fact that I'm now taking up a place in your life again?" And she said, "My father will be overjoyed. He's been trying to get me to do this since I was 6 years old, and he will be very pleased that this is happening. My mother will be very sour. I haven't even told her what I'm doing yet. I wanted to see how it was going and where it was headed before I was going to talk to her. But I'll make a prediction. She's going to be really upset with me. She's going to say, 'Now I have to share you with yet another parent. Having to share you with one isn't bad enough. I'm going to have to share you with a second one on top of that. You're going to go to three Thanksgivings now.' And she will just be sour and punish me for what I'm doing." And uh, her birth mother said, "Would your father be interested in talking to me?" She said, "I haven't asked him, but I'm sure he will rush to do that. When do you want to talk to him?" "Well, I have some free time tomorrow. If he could call me tomorrow, have him call me. And I would like to talk to him too." So I called her the next day and I started off with a heartfelt and profound apology. I said, "You have a delightful daughter, and I take no credit for that. I exploited her. She was a restitution child. She has an older adopted, very damaged brother. And I took her to live in that family, knowing I might be divorcing her adoptive mother. And I did get a divorce when she was a little bit over two. I tried to stay in her life as much as I could. I tried to be a good parent, but the divorce was ugly and terrible, and she went through hell. And she had to surrender a good deal of her childhood to cater to her damaged brother. It was not a good home for her to be adopted into. It's a tribute to her resiliency, her intelligence, her goodness, that she's as an exceptional young woman as she is now. And I take no credit. And I apologize to you that I greedily adopted her. So that was almost like a ticket of leaving the household. If I left her mother with a normal child, it might be more possible for me to leave without guilt. And that was a terrible thing to do to your daughter. That was not the kind of family you wanted your child adopted into. And I could hear her crying on the phone on the other side. And I said, you will see, your daughter is wonderful, and you have my apologies. If there's any way I can make up to this for you, with you, please tell me. And I want you to know I consider you're now a new and additional member of my family. You will be welcome. I look forward to meeting you. I look forward to spending time with you. We are a Thanksgiving house. If you'd like to bring your daughters to Thanksgiving next year, we'd be very happy to have them. I'm looking forward to meeting and enjoying and maybe being part of the life of your daughters too. I just consider that my family's become bigger now. And that was the main conversation we had. Uh, Things got much worse. One of the things that happened was that Naomi turned out to have a congenital deformed hip, and it was starting to get arthritic, and she was going to need surgery if she didn't want to live in pain for the rest of her life. It was possible to put a plate of some kind in there and realign she didn't need a hip replacement. It was possible to repair the birth defect, but she was going to be laid up for at least 2 weeks, and she would have to hobble around, stay in bed in the beginning, then start physical therapy. And she lived alone with her mother, and her mother's house, she was not a good house. She didn't want to go to her mother's house. It felt dangerous to her. So she asked my wife and I, could she stay in our place and convalesce here? And we were not immediately overjoyed. We were cautious. We said, we're going to have to get you up a flight of stairs because our apartment in this triplex is on the second floor. We can get a hospital bed put in the living room of the apartment. That would probably work. We have two dogs. They're always jumping up on couches and beds. We wonder if we could supervise them, and you're going to need care. Can we have to find a nursing service because we're going to continue working every day. We don't have a lot of time to fix your meals or be with you until after working hours. You're gonna need practical care. So we need to find a nursing service who will come, and it's going to take us a while to put the pieces in place. We would like to have you. And Hermine in her spare time is going to call agencies and nursing services and check with the surgeon about what kind of care she needs and how intensive it needs to be and what the projected trajectory forward is before you can take up independent living again. So we started, and we said we made a commitment. We said we're going to do it. We didn't count on the fact that as the time got shorter, Naomi got more and more frightened she would have no place to go. And we couldn't say yes that we had solved all the problems yet. We were being prudent and cautious. So behind her backs, without telling us, she got in touch with her birth mother. And she said, I'm really feeling uncomfortable. My dad said that I could stay with him, but there are practical problems to be worked out, and they're not getting worked out. She didn't tell us she was doing that. She said to Bonnie, that was the woman's name, You have an apartment on the first floor, and it's easy access from the door to the bedroom. You have an extra bedroom. uh, uh, your girls share a bedroom and there's an extra room for guests. Could I have the guest room and could I stay with you? And Bonnie said, yes, I'll even take time off to supervise you if you want to come and stay here. So Naomi made the decision that she was going to do it. And finally, Hermine fixed the last hurdle to get over, called Naomi and said, okay, it's all the ducks are in a row, you can come to us. And Naomi said, I'm not coming. I'm going to go be with Bonnie. And she said it in a way that suggested, if I would read gestural communication, that she was put off, that it took us so long to say yes for sure, and that we didn't make her a bigger priority, and we were callous and not as responsive to her as she would have liked us to have been. That felt like an ugly thing that may have been happening. So she came out of the hospital. We went to visit her right away. We met the birth mother on that occasion. The daughters were now away at college at that point. They came to see Naomi. We met grandfather. Grandfather was still alive. He came to see Naomi from Arizona, so everybody could meet the lost sibling who was now in place, even though she was only convalescing. And it felt good. It felt uplifting. And Naomi recovered and stopped living with her mother after some physical therapy, went back to her apartment. And the next memory that comes to me is she finished graduate school. And we were invited. Oh, shit. I don't think I told an earlier story. Yes, I did. Did I talk about how Hermine and I were not invited to her bat mitzvah? I think I did when she was 13. We were not allowed to attend her bat mitzvah. So we were having the same fucking trouble about whether we would get an invitation to her graduation or not. But Naomi insisted. So we got an invitation to her graduation, and her mother tried to stipulate she would not come to Naomi's graduation if my wife went to Naomi's graduation or any of the other members of my family new family went to graduation. And Naomi stood her ground. She said that she could not dictate who was going to be invited to the graduation. And uh, uh, her mother showed her displeasure by saying that she wasn't bringing anybody from her family. She had finally married Ed, the man she'd been living with. She wasn't going to bring Ed either. She didn't want to celebrate fully with Naomi about the graduation because it was being contaminated with the presence of too many other people. Oh, Bonnie was being invited to the graduation too. We'd said, "Come, you can please sit with us." The only way Diane was going to come is if she sat far away from all of us in a different part of where the benches were for the people attending. It was an indoor ceremony. Uh, there was the usual parade. The graduates came up to get their degrees one at a time. Their names were announced. And as Naomi started to get into line, I went up to the front because I was going to take pictures of her. She was marching up, pictures of her receiving the degree. And I could see that her mother was rushing with a camera from far away to come. And as soon as she saw that I was there, she would not even come stand anywhere near me to take pictures of her own daughter because I was there taking pictures of her daughter. I had somehow preempted it. And afterwards, the graduates were swirling around in a reception area. And Naomi came up to me and said, I'm having to tell you that I am going out for dinner after this event with her mom and her side of the family, and I won't be with you the rest of today. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I saw you plenty here at the graduation ceremony. You can't come and be with me after this is over. I had to live with all this stupidity and ugliness. God damn it. So I remember the graduation, and then Soon after graduation, Naomi got a job and she was really happy. She got a job back in Santa Barbara. She was hired as the chief executive officer and director of a nonprofit that was devoted to keeping Santa Barbara small and home-like. It was fighting the developers. It was trying to prevent large scale expansion and the building of mega mansions and all the things that were taking place in the city. She was to appear and give testimony. She was to try and get the county board of directors and the city council on her side to pass more stringent zoning requirements about new construction and to try and keep the feeling of Santa Barbara, a sleepy old beach town as it was, in place. And she was very happy to do that. And I was proud of her. And I started to donate money to her nonprofit. We started to visit her occasionally in Santa Barbara. And she now had a boyfriend. And it was very clear that she was sexually active with him, but they would not live together, nor would they do anything committed in any way. Most of her social life still was with the group of Peace Corps volunteers who are now living in Santa Barbara. And he was just somebody she spent a lot of time with and traveled with occasionally. But that felt to me like a beginning. Like maybe as she came to understand her origins, maybe she would get more ready. She was like a late teenager having a dating relationship with her first crush. Maybe she would move on beyond that, make a significant relationship with somebody. I didn't know for sure. Uh, she continued to come into the city for various occasions. We were disappointed because there were many birthday parties or events that were being held that involved her twin grandchildren. They were her niece and nephew. I'm sorry, her twins who were here, or her stepsister from Northern California was coming and visiting. And she did not come very much. When she came to the city, as a matter of fact, she had a girlfriend who had young children and a husband, and she would stay with them and spend time with them. She wouldn't come and spend time with us, nor with her sister, who's her stepsister, who lived here. And Bonnie abandoned her too. Bonnie found a man to be with finally, and she moved to South Carolina, where her husband's family was, soon after Naomi started her job. So here we go with Naomi finding her mother again, and then in some ways being abandoned by her birth mother again. And I believe increasingly she felt like I cared, because since she wasn't around so much, because I had rejected her, I cared much more about her older or second step sibling than I did about her. She wasn't that important to me. She was fungible. And I could not prove to her that she mattered to me in any effective way. And the turning point, for the final turning point, came at my twin grandchildren's third birthday party. We had it at a Mexican restaurant. It was their favorite place to go out for dinner. We had a piñata for them to smash. There was a private dining room there that we could be in. And many friends I had and knew were there. And of course, she was invited. Her sister from Northern California came with the older grandchildren we had too. And that was to be a big event in the stepchildren's lives. And she brought them a present. And she was seated closer to them, and she was flirting with one of the friends of my daughter and son-in-law. She was seated next to him, flirting. She gave the present to the twins, one each for each of them. They opened them and they nodded or said something. And they got busy with other things. They got busy breaking open the pinata. And at one point in the evening, Naomi came up to my end of the table. Hermine was there and she was there. And she said, "Would you believe it?" And I said, "Would I believe what?" And she said, "Would you believe they didn't even thank me for my presents?" your grandchildren are being raised with no manners, she said. And Hermine said, you were very busy flirting with so and so. You were talking to him all the time. You had your back turned to the twins. I heard them from this distance. They tried to thank you. They said something as best they could. They're only 3 years old. You're really upset with them? The 3-year-old kids didn't thank you sufficiently for a birthday present? And she said, yes, I believe that the proper kind of training should start early enough. And it's apparent to me that her mother doesn't know how to raise them. And so Hermine was offended that her other child was being attacked. She thought Naomi was out of bounds and really strange. And she said, I don't agree with you at all. And they started to argue. And Naomi got very belligerent. She had had two drinks that evening too before dinner, so she was a little bit drunk and quite unpleasant. And the bad feeling continued. She came to Thanksgiving that year. The birthday party was in February. She came to Thanksgiving. The same guy was there, so she was flirting with him all evening. And Naomi decided to revisit the argument that took birth at the birthday party. And in the aftermath, while we're tidying up after Thanksgiving, she says to her, I mean, I still haven't changed my mind. I don't think that Brian and Mallory have good manners. They didn't behave politely enough at the dinner table, and I think you should talk to your daughter. You need to do something about how they're being raised. And Hermine said, I don't want to be talked about. I'm not going to have this conversation with you. And Naomi got up in her face and was screaming at her, you're not going to tell me what I'm allowed to talk about, and was very unpleasant to my wife. And that's how the evening ended. They decided not to talk to each other anymore. And then I started to carry on an email conversation with my daughter. I remember sending her a birthday card. And I said, I want to get together with you. And she said, I'm busy. And she never contacted us again when she came to town. The alienation started. And I tried to break it twice. I suggested that she have lunch with me, and she agreed to come to town. And I said, I want to do a restart. And it was apparent that she might be willing to have some kind of relationship with me if my wife was not included. And I said, no, I'm a married man. I'm not going to do that. Let's go to therapy together. Let's do something to work this out. And she said, no, I've been deeply hurt. I've been squelched. I believed all the years I was growing up that she would have preferred that I not be born. And I always believed she cared much more about her own children than she did about me. So no, the answer is no. I tried one more time. This was now 3 years ago. We were going to make a trip north. My middle sister in San Rafael was having a 90th birthday party, and I wanted to go. And I thought we hadn't been up to Eureka, where my other child lives with her husband. And one of her children is emancipated living in New York City, but the other child was there. I thought, let's take a nice car trip. Let's drive up through all of California. It's beautiful. Take a leisurely trip and stay up in Eureka for a few days after the event in San Rafael with my sister. And we can stop. Let me try again to see if Naomi would have a meal with us. We'll drive up. Maybe she'd have dinner with us. And she did. I told her that Hermine would be there. Again, I wanted to try and do a restart. Could we just have a pleasant dinner and catch up on life and times? And she was living at that point with her boyfriend. She had proceeded from just dating him to living with him. Things were good. I was happy. I liked him. And maybe things were getting more intense with him. I wanted to hear about that. But I invited him to come to that dinner too. I thought he'd be a voice of sanity and help heal the breach that had gone on. But he didn't come. She claimed he was busy. And everybody was polite and on good behavior, and we gossiped. We didn't visit the pain that had happened. We didn't try to fix it in any way. We found out that her life had moved on. She had been so into politics. She was giving testimony before the county board of supervisors very often, and she was giving testimony to the city council that one of the city councilmen needed a senior staff person and asked her if she'd give up her position in a nonprofit and get into politics and come be her senior staffer. So Naomi was taking now the second step in her career development. She was in politics and she was working as chief of staff for a city councilman. That was the big change in her life. And uh, it was a reasonably pleasant evening, and we separated and hit the road the next morning. And I again tried to send her emails, which she did not answer. And I again suggested restarts, which she did not respond to. We continued to honor her birthdays. We'd send her a birthday card and a present. We wouldn't even get a thank you. She didn't even do that for my birthday or Hermine's birthday. She is disconnected from us, and we only reach out now in the most trivial fashions, honoring her birthday when she has a birthday. And I have made no further attempt to do any. So I think I'll rest before I move on, and you can unmute yourselves. And if you have any comments, suggestions, thoughts about my troubled relationship with my younger stepdaughter, I'd be glad to hear.
Arthur, the name of this chapter is The Unchosen Child.
Yes.
And in some ways, it was almost like throughout your lifetime, Naomi was constantly testing to see if you were going to choose her or not. And would you choose her over your other two daughters? Would you
And
choose
over
her?
my wife.
Yeah, well, just in some ways, what was your priority
Yes.
towards her? And that was something that was kind of like very important and intense. And
Yes.
and I don't know if the straw that broke the camel's back, as they say, was when in some ways it was not, you did not completely embrace her when she needed the convalescence.
Yes.
And in some ways, instead of saying, we'll make it work, I'll stay home from work, we'll get a lift to take you to the second floor. We'll do anything that we can, to help you in your convalescence,
Yes.
because you're our daughter.
Yes.
And that didn't happen.
No, it happened, but the putting the pieces, we didn't make the commitment first and
Correct.
then say, we'll make the pieces happen. We wanted to make sure it was possible before we gave her a final go ahead because we were afraid we were going to find out it wasn't possible in any way that was manageable.
But I'm assuming that, this is fairly common, and I've sort of seen it, kind of like in my practice in terms of like an adopted child. It's like, kind of like, are they a priority? Are they number one? Are they, going to, in some ways will their parents do anything for them, at any time? And she was constantly testing that.
So yes, thank you. That helps me sit in the whirlpool of my guilt and think of times when I didn't fight hard enough. I abandoned the custody battle. I didn't go to the wall on that one. Partly because she seemed me not to want to do that, but I think in some ways it was a test over and over again.
Absolutely.
Would I do it anyhow, even if she was causing her great grief? And would I rescue her from the poisonousness of her adoptive mother and get her out of that household where her brother was attacking her? Oh, and then I abandoned him too and stuck her with having to be responsible for him. So I was Arthur the abandoner. And how dare I support her mean in telling her her perceptions of how her niece and nephew are being raised were not the correct ones, and somebody else's perceptions were better than hers.
Well, in some ways, she could also kind of like see maybe herself in these children, and that in some ways is that she was not the beloved child.
Should I still try and fix it some more?
You could.
Yeah.
I know what I'll do. I'll call her and say, I've left my wife and I want to live with you for the rest of my life.
No, I think that's what you were supposed to say to your ex-wife. I can't help but see some traits rubbing off there. I also see this, and this is just maybe an idea for a future talk, which would be fun in a way, but the ramifications of bad mate selection. So maybe what would be good mate selection, the qualities to look for and the
Oh, I
things
can,
to,
yeah.
yeah, I think that would be a great one.
Uh, it's funny. In some ways, learning to be a parent was a mountain that I was climbing. And there was a gradient on it, a steep gradient. And with the first child, it proved to be just impossible for me to figure out how to be his parent. And obviously, I didn't make my priorities correct. I wasn't willing to neglect the stepchildren I felt responsible for and neglect the building of my relationship with my new wife enough to make Naomi feel like she was the most adored and special one. So I failed on that gradient. And as you'll hear, I'm about to move on to talk about Amy, who was my first stepchild. And she was 8 when I moved in. And the outcome with her is significantly better than it was with the first two, but not nearly good, quite good enough yet. I'll be talking about the complexities that led to bad outcomes some of the time. And with my last child, Karen, being a parent has been mainly a joy, and things have gone well and smoothly, and the relationship is very sustaining and very important to all the parties, and including the relationship with my grandchildren that she gave birth to. So the final one, the one who was the youngest at the time, or the newest arrival in my life at the time, turned out to have the best outcome for me. Maybe I did learn some things along the way.
I'm wondering also with Naomi that you can use the age card, and that in some ways that you kind of like you before you die, you want to be able to talk with her, and you want to be able to apologize to her for a number of things, and that in some ways is that you want to be able to, to tell her how important and cared for she was in your life.
Scott just called you old, Arthur.
Sorry about that, but Arthur's used that before anyway.
I am old. Wait, yeah, thank you. I'll make a distinction. I am old, but I am not aged.
There you go.
Let's see, what time is it? Ah, I will talk a little bit more. I'll start the story of Amy by saying that, well, she came as a package. There, I moved in with my wife to be, my present wife of 50 years, and there were two children there, biological children of hers, who were 8 and 6. And one of the problems that needed to be resolved, and I was very creative at resolving it, is my foolish young bride to be had had those children very close together. She had enjoyed the companionship and company of having an infant. And as the infant got older, she decided that she didn't want to stop with one child. So she would have two. And they were actually born only 14 months apart. And that makes for real fatigue in the household. And somebody's needing something all the time, and you don't get much time off. And there's horrible rivalry between children who are born that close together. The older one doesn't get a chance to be the special one and the focus of attention up until an age where the older one is ready to start differentiating some more and ready to be on his or her own some more. So is much more capable of letting go and not intruding or not feeling pushed to one side because it's part of the natural flow of what they're wanting to do anyhow. So this was a set recipe for trouble that I stepped into a household with two little girls so close together in age. There were many other parts of what I was stepping into that weren't too apparent to me until I got more involved. First of all, I knew my wife at first because she came looking for office space in the office where I had my group practice with my colleagues. We had extra unused office space in that suite. And at that time, she was not a family therapist like she is now. She was an educational therapist. She had been a school teacher, so she had learned how to be an exceptional tutor for children with exceptional needs. She was very intuitive. She could find some way to relate to them. Her tutoring relationship was very therapeutic for them too. And she had moved on even to found a program at Cedars-Sinai Hospital working with special children who had special needs. So I respected her, and I thought she had her own career going. And I knew the man she had separated for was the son of one of Los Angeles' leading trial attorney. He was a very successful man. He had a clientele of movie stars and government people. He had the rich and famous were his clients, and he was a very wealthy man who had a house in Bel Air. And this was the son who also had become a lawyer. And I assumed what I was inheriting as a woman who was very well situated because she was divorcing this very wealthy scion of a very successful parent. And the home that they lived in must have been really shockingly beautiful. So I went to visit her for the first time as we got involved with each other. And she was living in a shitty cottage in Laurel Canyon area of Los Angeles. It was quite run down. It had tremendous deferred maintenance. The backyard was all full of weeds and untrimmed brush, and the roof leaked. It was a tiny place. There was one little bedroom that the children were shared together, and there was a master bedroom that was small, and there was only one bathroom in the place, and the three of them had to share a bathroom. And when I met her before I had fully separated from my former wife, the divorce was still in process. I hadn't moved out yet. I moved out into my own apartment, but I started to come and stay overnight in that house for a while. And Jesus Christ, you had to line up to go pee sometimes because the bathroom was being used by four people. It was not a pleasant environment. And so that's how I started. And I got into the middle of it and tried to regularize things and take over. So my outcome with Amy started in that fashion. I had pity for her that she was adorable in many ways and talented, and that she had to share everything with the little sister. And I found the little sister very winning too. I liked both of them, but I had pity on the bickering they were doing all the time. And I was committed. My first task would be to help them not to have to bicker with each other so much. So I will stop here. Is there anybody want to comment on the new perspectives on where I'm going yet? Nope. Hearing nothing.
No,
All right. We will start there with my attempts to raise Amy.
okay.
Sounds good. We'll
All right.
see you next week.
Have a good
See you next
weekend.
week.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.